Welcome back. Now, Anderson, I want to tell you something. Just this last week, I was actually on campus at Cambridge for a whole week. I was meeting students, meeting faculty, understanding more about some of the different academic programs, and I was very impressed. The UK, schools like Cambridge and Oxford, they're 700, 800 years old. Students often study one focused domain, and they're artisans of this craft. And these schools have been training graduates in this way for hundreds and hundreds of years. They make the US universities look like, modern art, relatively. What's your advice applying for students to the UK?
So, my advice is really simple for the UK. UK universities are much more academically focused than US ones. So, if you are aiming to apply to study something like history, then your application needs to be totally committed to history. Because the number one thing that the UK university is trying to figure out about you from your application is, are you a good student to study history? Are you someone who is absolutely committed to studying history? And are you going to be able to handle what is unique about the UK university system, which is that you do not take general education courses. You do not take math or English or history or sciences as part of every single degree. No. In 3 years, or 4 for some very special cases, you will get an undergraduate degree, and the reason we can give it to you in 3 is because you will study nothing but the subject that you applied for. So you really need to be able to demonstrate throughout your application, through your letters of recommendation, through the subjects you chose to study in school, but finally, and most importantly, through how you write your personal statement, or as it's changing next year, your UCAS questionnaire, why it is that you're absolutely ready to study a very particular subject for 3 years or 4 years or 6 years if it's medicine.
Now, real talk for a second here. Back in the day, I had an offer from Cambridge for economics, and I was tossing up US versus UK. What led me to pull the trigger on the US was I didn't really feel like I had such absolute conviction on economics that I could commit to do only economics for 3 years. I actually found economics later in high school when I was about 16. I self-studied the subject, so I hadn't even sat in a classroom for the subject. And so it felt like a big bet to go all in on this. Turns out I actually loved economics, and it would have been fun. But for those students hearing that they're going to do nothing but one subject for 3 years, what would you say to them?
Well, what I would say is that that's exactly how you should be approaching the question as well of whether you should be applying to the UK at all. But secondly, if you do want to go to the UK, that's how you should be preparing for the application process, is trying to figure out, is that subject actually right for you? So if you are trying to decide whether econ is right for you, then for the UK, it's actually quite simple how you do that. Go do an online course on university level economics, right? Go read a book published by a UK academic who teaches economics, or even go look at a university level econ textbook. These are often very, very easy and simple, but also quite illuminating ways to decide, yes, is this really something I'm prepared to study for 3 years or not?
Now, I want to talk about references because one peculiar thing about the UK is you usually only have one reference letter. And so it's pretty high stakes. What kind of role do these references play in UK applications, in your opinion, Anderson?
So they really help to contextualize what kind of student that you are outside of what your grades can tell you. And for certain universities, like for example, LSE or Oxford or Cambridge, they actually do tend to look for quite different things in the reference letters because they're trying to cultivate a very particular kind of student within those unis. So for example, I went to LSE for both my undergrad and my master's. One of the things that I can tell you is absolutely true of LSE, and is true of it more so than any other university that I've ever been to, is LSE is a place which seeks out the most ambitious and the most career-driven people on the planet. They want people who are going to change the world, and they understand that those people are trying to change the world through what they do after university. So they're looking in their reference letters from the teachers to hear, what is it about you that makes you a uniquely ambitious individual who will therefore fit really well into the culture at LSE? If you're someone aiming for Oxford or Cambridge instead, however, it's very different, right? Because of the tutorial or supervision system. Instead, what they're looking for there is evidence that you are going to be a student who is going to excel in that kind of 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 or 1-to-3 small group learning environment, which, you could be someone who's a really good fit for LSE, but not for Oxford or Cambridge, or vice versa. And that's what they're trying to figure out from those.
Now, can you give me some examples of someone that's gone to one of these top UK universities? What was their profile actually like in practice, and how do they find the experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So one particularly memorable student I worked with a couple of years ago, she went to one of the top schools in Singapore. And, I'll give a little bit of a spoiler here, right? She ended up applying to Oxford for PPE. And the thing that really sets apart the students who go to Oxford for PPE is that there's a very famous Guardian article about this from 2015. this is the course that produces the world's prime ministers, presidents, diplomats, journalists, thought leaders. So this student needed to show that she really excelled academically. So she did the IB diploma and also self-study for additional AP subjects. Anything she couldn't study in the IB, she did in the AP as much as she could. But also, this student was a really, really intense reader. Before she had even met me at the age of 16, she had already devoured Why Nations Fail, the book by Acemoglu and Robinson, who I think just yesterday it was announced that they won the Nobel Prize for Economics. But she didn't just come in to her meetings with me saying that she loved the book or she agreed with everything they said. Instead, she came in ready to dissect it and ready to criticize it ruthlessly. Even a Nobel Prize winner in economics, she didn't just agree with everything they said. She found reasons why she disagreed with everything that they were saying. And where she disagreed, she came up with really strong academic, critically analyzed reasons why. And this is the kind of student who I absolutely believe will prosper and will thrive in the academic environment at Oxford. And I was very gratified to hear that she got, her offer for Oxford PPE as well.
It is crazy to think of all these prime ministers that have been produced from this program. Rishi comes to mind as a recent example, but, he did his undergrad in PPE and his MBA at Stanford. And certainly this idea that, Oxford just mints these prime ministers on both sides of the political aisle and around the world, it's quite mind-blowing. And it's become almost a, stomping ground for these political aspirations.